just hours ago. The world was on the edge of total catastrophe. Donald Trump warned that a whole civilization would die tonight. Iran threatened to drag every country in the region into war. And then, 90 minutes before the deadline, everything changed. A 2-week ceasefire was announced. And at the center of it all is a document that almost nobody is talking about in detail. Iran's 10-point peace plan. This plan is not just a ceasefire proposal, it is Iran's blueprint for reshaping the entire Middle East. Every single point in this document carries massive consequences for global oil prices, for military alliances, for nuclear weapons, and for you, no matter where you live. So let us break down each of these 10 demands, one by one, understand what Iran actually wants, and ask the real question that everyone should be asking right now. Will America accept any of this? And what happens if they do not? Point number 1. Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz. This is the biggest demand in the entire plan. Iran wants the world to officially recognize its dominance over the Strait of Hormuz. Not just passage, dominance. Iran is demanding that all ships passing through this narrow waterway do so under coordination with Iran's armed forces. Now understand why this matters. 20% of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz every single day. That is roughly 1 in every 5 barrels of oil consumed on this planet. When Iran partially blocked this strait during the war, oil prices exploded past $100 a barrel. Asian economies were hit the hardest. Fuel prices spiked worldwide. Iran even proposed a transit fee of around $2 million per ship, split between Iran and Oman, with Iran using its share to rebuild war-damaged infrastructure. Will the U.S. accept this? This is the hardest point for Washington. America has spent decades ensuring freedom of navigation in this waterway. Handing Iran formal control would be a historic reversal. Expect this to be the most fiercely negotiated point in Islamabad on Friday. Point number 2. Recognition of Iran's uranium enrichment program. Iran is demanding that the United States formally accept Iran's right to enrich uranium as part of any peace deal. This is a direct challenge to everything Washington has demanded for the past 2 decades. Here is the background. Before this war began, the International Atomic Energy Agency reported that Iran had stockpiled an unprecedented amount of highly enriched uranium, approaching weapons-grade levels. In June 2025, the U.S. bombed 3 Iranian nuclear sites. During the 12-day war, Israel targeted nuclear scientists and key facilities. Despite all of that destruction, Iran still refuses to give up enrichment. Tehran frames this as a right under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty for peaceful energy purposes. Washington says enrichment is a pathway to a nuclear bomb. Will the U.S. accept this? Trump told Netanyahu directly that he will not give up on the demand, that Iran hand over all enriched uranium, and agreed to never resume enrichment. This is a red line for Washington, but Iran has made it equally clear that enrichment is non-negotiable. This single point could collapse the entire peace process. Point number 3. Lifting of all primary sanctions. Iran wants every single primary sanction imposed by the United States to be completely removed. These are the sanctions that directly prohibit American companies and citizens from doing business with Iran. They cover oil exports, banking, trade, and technology transfers. These sanctions have strangled Iran's economy for years. Inflation is out of control, the currency has collapsed, and ordinary Iranians cannot access basic medicines or financial services. Will the U.S. accept this? Partial sanctions relief is possible. America did it during the 2015 nuclear deal. But lifting all primary sanctions without major concessions from Iran, that is a very tough sell, especially with Congress already pushing back against Trump's handling of this war. Point number 4, lifting of all secondary sanctions. This goes even further. Secondary sanctions target other countries and companies around the world that do business with Iran. If a Chinese bank processes an Iranian payment, it faces American penalties. If an Indian refinery buys Iranian oil, it risks being cut off from the U.S. financial system. Iran wants all of these gone. This would effectively reintegrate Iran into the global economy overnight. Will the U.S. accept this? Secondary sanctions are America's most powerful economic weapon. They give Washington leverage over not just Iran, but over every country that trades with Iran. Giving this up would weaken American influence over global finance. This is extremely unlikely without major concessions from Tehran. Point number 5. Removal of UN Security Council and IAEA resolutions. Iran demands the termination of all United Nations Security Council resolutions and International Atomic Energy Agency measures imposed against it. These are not just American sanctions. These are international restrictions backed by the global community. These resolutions were put in place because the IAEA found Iran non-compliant with its nuclear safeguards agreements. They include restrictions on missile development, nuclear technology transfers, and weapons procurement. Will the U.S. accept this, even if America wanted to? This requires cooperation from Russia, China, France, and Britain. At the Security Council. And here is the irony. Russia and China just vetoed a watered-down resolution on the Strait of Hormuz. The geopolitics of the Security Council make this point incredibly complex. Point number 6. Full payment of war damages and compensation. Iran is demanding that the United States pay for the destruction caused during Operation Epic Fury. 38 days of bombing have devastated Iranian infrastructure, universities, military bases, petrochemical plants, communication networks, and civilian areas have all been hit. A major elementary school was struck early in the war, killing approximately 170 children, according to reports. Iran wants full compensation. The numbers have not been publicly stated, but estimates suggest the damage runs into hundreds of billions of dollars. Will the U.S. accept this? America has never paid war reparations to a country it has attacked. Not after Iraq, not after Libya, not after Afghanistan. The political reality in Washington makes direct compensation payments almost impossible. However, Iran's alternative proposal is clever, using the Strait of Hormuz transit fees to fund reconstruction, instead of demanding direct payments. Point number 7. Release of all frozen Iranian assets. Iran has billions of dollars in assets frozen in banks across the world, in South Korea, Japan, Iraq, and elsewhere. These funds were locked under sanctions, and Iran wants every dollar released. Some estimates put the total frozen assets at over $100 billion. For a war-devastated country, this money is critical for reconstruction. Will the U.S. accept this? There is precedent here. During the 2015 nuclear deal, some Iranian assets were unfrozen. This is one of the more negotiable points and could be used as a bargaining chip, releasing assets in phases as Iran meets certain conditions. Point number 8. Withdrawal of all U.S. combat forces from the region. Iran wants every American soldier, every fighter jet, and every warship removed from bases across the Middle East. Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Jordan. The United States currently has tens of thousands of troops across the region. These forces are the backbone of American power projection in the Middle East. Will the U.S. accept this? Absolutely not in full. Not a chance. American bases in the Gulf are central to U.S. strategy against not just Iran, but also for counterterrorism, containing ISIS remnants, and balancing against growing Russian and Chinese influence. However, a partial drawdown or repositioning of forces could be on the table as a goodwill gesture during negotiations. Point number 9. End of hostilities against all components of the axis of resistance. This is about Iran's allies and proxies across the entire region. Iran demands that the United States and Israel stop attacking Hezbollah in Lebanon, stop operations against Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and Syria, and cease all hostilities linked to the broader regional conflict. Iran specifically insisted that Lebanon must be included in any ceasefire deal. This point is explosive, because Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has explicitly stated that the ceasefire does not cover Lebanon. Israel is continuing its ground invasion of southern Lebanon and has been systematically destroying entire villages. Will the U.S. accept this? This creates a direct conflict between Washington and its closest ally. Israel wants to continue degrading Hezbollah. Iran wants Hezbollah protected. This contradiction could be the deal breaker that unravels the entire ceasefire. Point number 10. Ratification through a binding UN Security Council resolution. The final demand is perhaps the most strategic of all. Iran wants everything locked into a binding United Nations Security Council resolution. Every single point in this plan. This would make the agreement legally enforceable under international law. Iran learned a painful lesson from the 2015 nuclear deal. That agreement was backed by a Security Council resolution. But when Trump withdrew from it in 2018, the entire framework collapsed. Iran does not want that to happen again. A binding resolution would make it far more difficult for any future American president to walk away. Will the U.S. accept this? This is actually one of the more achievable points in the plan. If a deal is reached, both sides would benefit from international legal backing. The challenge is getting Russia and China to cooperate, which is never guaranteed. So here is the reality. Iran's 10-point plan is ambitious, aggressive, and maximalist. Iran knows it. The United States called it maximalist. But here's the thing. The U.S. also called it workable. That word, workable, is the most important signal to come out of Washington. It means negotiations are real. It means compromise is possible. It means there is a genuine opening for the first time since bombs started falling. But open does not mean settled. The Islamabad talks on Friday will determine whether this 2-week ceasefire becomes a permanent peace, or just a brief pause before the next devastating wave of destruction. The biggest obstacles are crystal clear: the Strait of Hormuz, uranium enrichment, and Lebanon. The next 72 hours will decide the future of the Middle East, and possibly the future of global energy security for decades to come. The world is watching. Stay tuned, because we are covering every single development as it unfolds. This story is far from over. The real battle has just begun, and it is not happening on the battlefield anymore. It is happening at the negotiating table in Islamabad, and the stakes have never been higher